At the end of the month, it's time for a new Bujo. This time I decided on a love letter theme because you can't avoid love in February, right? But I wanted to give it a different spin nevertheless, so I chose love letters. Therefore, I gathered every paper craft supply that fits the theme. Stamps, die cuts, stencils, everything. I have a thing for stamps and letters, so I have quite some of these supplies. Some are really easy to make and you don't need to draw anything if you have some stamps. Many times you could use real stamps instead of stamps, as you'll be able to see later on. After I finally gathered everything, I opened my Bujo and started by selecting the colors of ink I'll use. I have several mini stamp pads of dye ink from Memento and some archival ink pads in different shades as well. So I chose everything red and made myself a chart. At first I thought I'll use green as well, but later decided against it. For my cover, I gathered all the stamps that are designed as postage stamps and the larger one as the back of the postcard for the calendar and focal image. I first stamped this postcard on the right side of double spread and scattered all the postage stamps around it. I used different shades of red, pink, purple and reddish brown to stamp them and to add interest, and finished by writing the name of the month and a small calendar into the postcard. I added some hearts with different stamps that I had. Some are from other sets. One I made myself from fun foam with a heart-shaped punch, and the one with 3 hearts is made by my middle one, who cut it from rubber scraps and also carved the handle herself. I love that stamp, not just for sentimental reasons. It's a great filler stamp too. Lastly, I added some small envelopes to fill the gaps. When I turned the page, I noticed that stamps bled through, so I decided to leave that page empty and just glue them together later. That way I can stamp on the next page and it won't matter if anything bleeds through. I'll glue it together in the end so that I don't have to wait for the glue to dry and I don't need to worry that any of the ink would seep through and color the wet glue. For the monthly page, I chose a simple stamp of a stamps frame and stamped it 29 times. Yes, this year is a leap year, if you haven't noticed yet. I like useful monthlies and I really like to have letter squares or rectangles or other shapes for days better than just rows. So this fits perfectly. I added a header, dates and a place for a to-do list and the monthly was done. If you don't have a stamp like this, you could use the frames from real stamps that are left when you use up the stamps. Or you could make a frame yourself and stencil it. You'll see how to do that in my weekly. Or you could just glue some real stamps on as well. If the design is too busy, you could knock it down with some white acrylic paint or gesso. For the trackers, I used the same stamp but only stamped it 9 times because that's enough habits for me to track. On the right side, I used a stencil and a gigantic postage frame that I have never used so far. If you don't have that kind of a stencil, you could always just draw the postage frame by hand. It's really easy. Just a rectangle and then a scalloped edge on the other side of the rectangle. Lastly, I added the title that I sketched first. I used Pitt pens because I have them, but any marker would work for this simple lettering. The headers say trackers and ideas. After a quick consultation with my sketches, I decided on my first weekly. I used the same postage stamp, this time as my dailies. I added the initials of the days of the week with alphabet stamps. You could also write the dates and draw 7 rectangles and edit a line in the middle and a few lines for the address, if you don't have a stamp like this. I finished the spread with 2 stamps in the upper right corner to balance it out. For the next weekly, I used frame stamp as postage stamps for dailies that are lined horizontally, one beneath the other. The next spread is vertical, but I wanted a little image in the bottom, so I stamped a big stripe there. To make a stencil for dailies, I used a scrap frame from a real stamp, and to make stenciling easier, I added masking tape all around the frame. This will help to extend the stencil and also adhere it to where I need it. I put the tape onto my pullover first a couple of times so it loses some of the stickiness because I don't want it to rip my paper. This works like a charm. Now I position the frame stencil onto my Bujo. The dots help with positioning a lot. Since vertical spreads don't leave a lot of room in the width, I usually go with just 3 days per page, so 6 on a double spread. It's fine with me to have a weekend together in one column. Now I stamp the days and dates with alphabet stamps. The next spread is very easy, starting with stamps in the right corner. You could also make it with real stamps instead of the stamped ones, of course. I turned the whole page into an envelope, with the place for the address and return address as two of my dailies. Others will be just scattered around. For the last spread, I needed to prepare my frames first, so I die cut some scrap cardboard from boxes into frames with my die cuts. If you don't have stamped die cuts, you could emulate the look with some pinking shears, for example. I'm holding the inner rectangle because it's not attached anywhere. If it moves, just rearrange it again and stencil on. I'm using something that people call makeup brush. I don't use makeup, so I wouldn't know. I bought it for this purpose because I've heard other crafters use it, and it really works well. Now just some titles of the days, dates, and I have to glue the pages together where they bled through, and my bujo is done. And here's the final flip through. I hope you enjoyed it and that it got you some ideas how to use up some stamps, scraps, and how to make a stencil from a die cut or from scraps of postage stamps or whatever. I hope to see you next week with some experimentation. I'm not sure yet what, because I'm experimenting. I hope you'll join me. Bye bye!